Hello, everybody. Can't believe we are in August, but we are. Summer is rolling down to an end. We're getting close to back to school. And I am excited today in the Salesforce and Life Sciences group to introduce you to a topic that I personally have been like waiting for. I've been like, yes, I can't wait until this day. Automating patient recruitment with Salesforce Life Sciences Cloud. So when Megan first came to me with this idea, I was like, heck yeah, let's go. And she was like, okay, we want to do it in August. I was like, oh, I want to see it right away. So I know that you guys have been just as excited as I have for this topic, which is pushing the boundaries of Salesforce innovation inside of an area in the life sciences that I think is ripe for innovation. So I am not going to waste any more of Megan's time. I'm going to hand it over to her so she can introduce herself and get started.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Magon Mair, and I work for a summit level partner with Salesforce, which is Source. We are a Citius tech company. I've been in the Salesforce space for about 15 years, and then with healthcare specifically for 5 years. So the company I work for, Source, we are 100% Salesforce. We are 100% healthcare life sciences. And that kind of brought us here to Life Sciences Cloud, which we are one of the Salesforce migration partners. So we're like, how are we going to do this, right? Because it's new. There's not a lot of trailhead content out there right now. There's not a lot of webinars out there right now. There's not a certification ready for us. So what do? So we actually made ourselves customer zero. We bought Life Sciences Cloud, even though we don't use it in our day-to-day business, but for us to learn and get our hands on. And I have here with me Jubin. I'll let him introduce himself. He is one of the people who's helped leading the charge and coming up with this innovation with myself and by himself to help solve these problems that we see for our clients. And we're just finding that a lot of manual processes exist still in CROs for recruitment. And we're seeing a lot of the same use case over and over. Reached out to Shannon as she's leading this group and has been leading life sciences so far in this space and thought, hey, let's share some of the knowledge. So Jubin, I'll pass it to you to introduce yourself.
Hey, hi guys. First of all, can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Hi guys. So myself, Jubin, I work as a business analyst or Salesforce administrator for Source, a CTS tech company. I work majorly within the healthcare and life sciences domain. So this is where we are today. And today we're very excited to show you guys how we are automating patient recruitment with Salesforce Life Sciences Cloud.
Yep, so I'll just take a quick snippet just to give you guys set the stage, and then Jubin's going to share screen and he'll do a demo. So what we are finding is that there's a lot of disparate data, meaning that, right
Ronnie,
now,
Aarti?
what was that? Okay. I'll go ahead and continue. So what we're finding, there's a lot of disparate data. People are, the clinical research organizations are marketing in different places, social media campaigns, maybe television and whatnot, and then they want to get that form filled in. Not necessarily all the time is that form automatically going into a CRM. There's a lot of swivel chair. Sometimes there's not a phone integration with CTI. Sometimes the consent's not connected. Sometimes the emails aren't connected. Text messaging may or may not be present and may or may not be bi-directional. And it's really hard, right? People are very valuable, very knowledgeable that are doing recruitment, but the time is being spent on manual tasks rather than pushing these trials along. So with some of this automation, we're hoping to offload some of that work from those individuals and get it so that to a point where everybody's getting through the clinical trials faster because we're able to put more people, schedule more people for visits. Jubin, I'll let you go ahead and take over and share and explain what we've built thus far in our own org.
Yeah. Today, you all will watch us move through the system in real time, from sponsor configuring a study to participant finding it on the portal, to recruiters, coordinators, and investigators completing each step. So I'll call out the previous pain point which traditional clinical trial management systems face and show exactly how we solved it. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Is my screen visible to all of you?
Yep.
Okay. So let's assume that there was a new clinical trial being raised and everything, the approval was being, we have the approval for the clinical trial. What next? So when a sponsor logs into the Salesforce or a study designer, they can create a care program in the system. So basically, this opens up where they can enter a phase, they can enter an indication to target enrollment, what are the study arms, the study visits, and procedures for each clinical trial. So this is where the clinical trial gets created. And next we'll show you, when you go to the related list, we can see all the study arms for the particular clinical trial. It could be a arm for a placebo, it could be like an active arm, it could be a control group for a specific group. We can just mention all of those over here. Each study arm will now have certain study visits associated with them. So let me just go to arm related, and we can see all the study visits. So this might look like a lot to configure initially, but this is something that once it is configured, it goes for all the participants that would be registering for this clinical trials. So once a care program or a clinical trial has been configured fully, the study designer can publish it to the site. Once they click on this quick action, the trial gets published to their experience portal or the website. So let me show you that. Okay. So this is the portal that we had created for our own org. So when a participant lands on this portal, they can basically search for a clinical trial. You can just enter certain keywords, and then when they click on search, they would see a clinical trial pop up there.
Yeah, and then just one thing to note with all of the marketing that happens, they don't necessarily have to do the search, right? So if I'm taking this back from the potential research study candidates perspective, they could just click a link and they were on an ad for, say, this influenza drug. They would get taken right here to this screen.
Yep. So basically, when a participant visits the portal, they find the study, and when they click on view details, they will have a whole view of details for the clinical trial. Wait for it to load. Yep. So once the participant or a potential candidate is on the website, and when they click on their clinical trial, they can click verify eligibility from here. So this is using OmniScript with discovery framework that Salesforce Life Sciences comes out of the box. There are certain rules that run behind this. So when let's take the happy scenario here that the questions answered makes the candidate eligible for that particular study. So let's say yes, no symptoms. When they click on next, the business rules engine in the back determines whether the candidate is eligible or not eligible for this clinical trial. So when we click on next, it would show up a message that, oh, you're eligible for the clinical trial. And considering that certain clinical trials have a long list of questions that are to be answered, so we also have the functionality to copy the link or email me the link. Once they email me the link, the step where they are at gets stored in the session. And whenever they go to the email and click on that link, they're back to that session again.
Yeah, and that piece I think is really important because some of the other things that we can do with a form like this, like on a branded site for a particular clinical research organization would be is if you wanted to move your pre-screening eligibility checks, which could be like normally a 20-30 minute phone call, into a form like this, somebody can, if they're not feeling well, they could fill out part of it, get the link emailed, maybe they come back to it later. So that I think is a really cool piece of functionality where somebody could come back to where they're at and they don't lose their progress. Okay, go ahead.
Yep. From there, they can select a particular site. They can enter the name. Let's say, let's have this.
And just one note for the sites, based on the location of the individual, it can display based on distance as well.
Once we click on save details, the registration has been completed, and
yeah, that's it. So if I'm somebody who's looking in to get into this trial, all I had to do was click on a link on a social media ad, get linked to this form, fill out a couple questions. Yep, looks like you might be somebody that could be a fit. Figure out be presented with some locations that you might want to participate in as far as the site, distance from my home to that site. I've picked that, and now everything's done. There's no importing of my data. There's none of that. It's just going to be right inside of Salesforce itself and Life Sciences Cloud. So now he's on the research study candidate. So we're going to pivot from being somebody who wants to get into a study to what does the recruiter do, their day-to-day work, and how does Life Sciences Cloud improve that process?
So what the recruiter would do is recruiter would go to the candidate list. They can click on the new inbound list and they can just review the eligibility and use Service Cloud voice, or they can just give a phone call to the particular candidate. What they can do is they can just call the candidate and click on the launch assessment questions from here, and they can just enter those details for the patient. So just type in those quickly, just enter all those details here.
And just to note, like these can be configured to be whatever. We put some sample questions in here for like lifestyle, medical history, and things like that. But this is just all based on whatever the CRO would like to put in.
Correct. And all the assessment questions that were answered by the patient, the recruiter has a view of it. The recruiter can go to the assessment tab and they can just click on the assessment that was done recently. There could be multiple assessment also show up there based on the candidate. So when we can click on the related list, we can see all the assessment question and responses towards them for the candidate. Once we go back to that, once the pre-screening step is done, the next thing is the informed consent. So in informed consent, what happens is we have integrated this with DocuSign. Earlier, the pain points were paper consent delayed those enrollments and lacked audit readiness. So what happens is once you click on the informed consent stage, we see that there is a quick action that is shown up at the top. Once we click on the initiate consent request, this opens up a DocuSign layout for us where we can select a particular template, the consent document that is to be sent to the patient.
And one thing we are hearing from some of our clients is that they're actually having people drive to the site just to sign a form. So the e-consent, like he said, can speed up getting the person into the trial because they're not having to find time to make it to the site. They can just simply do it right there.
Got it. Wait for it to load. Yep. So we have a document already being set up in our Salesforce. So we can just select the particular document. We can click on next. We can set up the email subject. We can set up the message to be attached with the email. We can select the candidate that needs a signature. There could be a series of signatures that are required for the consent document. We can configure that as well. And then we can set up reminders. So let's say if a clinical trial is ending at sometime during August 28th, and we want to send them reminders to sign their consent during the whole week or send them weekly reminders, we can configure that as well here. And once we click on select recipient, we can just specify the recipient here. I will just show up a document. So once a candidate has already signed the DocuSign, what happens is we can go to the related list and we can see the document that is attached here. We can just open the document, it would show up a preview for the whole document. This is just a test document that we have used right now, but it would be the whole clinical trial consent document. So let us go back to our candidate. Just close this and close this. Yep. After the e-consent or the consent has been completed, what the recruiter does is the recruiter assigns or a custom arm for that particular study to the research study candidate. So what happens is once the candidate is deemed to be eligible for the clinical trial, we mark the status as to be enrolled. Once the status is marked as enrolled, we see a quick action pop up here. Once we click on the quick action, it would create a care program enrollee, which means that the candidate has been successfully enrolled for the clinical trial. So once we click on view participant record, we can see all the details here from which research study candidate they're cropped up from. We can see all the details here. Once we have that, the recruiter or the coordinator clicks on assign arm from here. As we saw that initially while creating a clinical trial, we had certain study arms that were configured for it. So once we click on the assign arm from here, we'll see a list of available arms. Let's say we select control group A for now, and we set the start date to be August 8th. And when we click on next, so this is where the scheduling or the visits that we configured initially comes into the play. Now, once we select the first visit date, it automatically schedules or creates a target visit schedule for the candidate. Once we click on Save Schedule, and we can close this, I'll just give it a refresh. Let's go on the Appointments tab. And once we select the control group, it will show up all the visits that were configured and the candidate has to go through in order to complete the clinical trial successfully. It will show up here. When we click on the schedule option, it gets linked to the Salesforce scheduler where we can schedule the visit and it will send an appointment reminder to the patient as well. So what happens next? Once the candidate shows up for the visit, the clinical coordinator or the recruiter, what they can do is they can come to the care program enrollee record, and all they have to do is click on Start Visit. Once they click on Start Visit, it will show up a list of procedures or checklist of items that needs to be completed for a particular visit. If the candidate is showing up for the baseline visit, that could be ECG checks, there could be BMI checks, there could be multiple other checks as well that needs to be completed. So we can just enter those details here. Once everything is done, once everything is marked as completed, then only the visit will be available to be marked as complete visit. Until all the checklist items or the procedures are not completed, we won't be able to complete the visit. So we can just mark the visit as complete visit. And yep, and there's one more thing that I wanted to highlight here is cohort filtering. So finding targeted participants require manual spreadsheet filtering earlier. So what we tried and do is we created a separate lightning, let me just open that, a patient recruitment, but the recruiter can open the cohort explorer and filter by medication, condition, or indication. There could be certain scenarios where they want to filter a candidate or a potential patient who is on certain medication or who has certain conditions. So what they can do is they can just click on open filters from here and they can select let's say we are on the medication tab. Let's say they select the medication and they click on search, it would filter the results for them here. And not only this, if there is a list of multiple users, so let me just take out the filter here. Let's assume there were 10 different candidates and from them, I want to filter out 5 of them and register them for a particular clinical trial. What we can do is we can select certain candidates from here, click on register candidates, and it will show up all the care programs which are in active status in our org. And they can just select the care program and just click on save. In the back, that would create a research study candidate for each of the candidate records, which would be then used for the care program. One thing to note here again is, let's say there was a research study candidate. A research study candidate can be deemed as ineligible at any given point. Let's say he shows up or he or she shows up for a screening visit, and at screening point, the coordinator determined that a candidate is no longer eligible for the clinical trial. What they could do is instead they figure out that the candidate could be a potential candidate for a different clinical trial. Over here, what they can do is they have a quick action here to withdraw the candidate. Once they click on withdraw, it would show up all the other care programs in the system and they can re-register the candidate to a different care program. Megan, over to you if you want to cover something else.
No, I think that was, so then at this point, we have it scheduled for a visit and go to the CTMS system at this point. We're working to do that. And then just some other, I guess I can take questions, but just real quickly, some things to note. This is of Life Sciences Cloud. This is just a piece of it. So this is the participant management piece that you're seeing. There's also, we have POCs for patient services and then for advanced therapy management, and we're developing the intelligent sales. So there's a lot of data models within Life Sciences Cloud. So it could be like, if you're coming in, it's a little, which data model do I pick? Which use case do I use? So that's something we're going through. So if anybody was interested in the other pieces, feel free to ask. But yeah, I'll take questions now that you guys may have. Comments.
Yeah, from another partner company perspective, I'm wondering what is the biggest challenges when implementing Life Sciences Cloud in terms of both the actual implementation, but in terms of the adoption for the companies that you're implementing it for?
I would say adoption has not been an issue for us because our mantra as we listen, we understand, we deliver. So we really are figuring out what people want, and we're helping with the change management piece. But as far as figuring out Life Sciences Cloud, I think the key for us was getting our hands on the solution and making sure that we understood it and we could apply the solution to use cases before we got with the client and we're trying to figure it out near real time. We're figuring it out ahead of the project, right? So we're learning the tool so that we can apply the tool and creating POCs for different use cases. And so that makes it where we're very confident in our abilities to implement these things because we know what we're doing. We've built it from scratch rather than getting a demo org and trying to read through documentation, figure out how did the demo org get set up. We're setting it up from the very get-go.
Thank you.
Just Megan, this has really been super interesting, and I just have a question based on your experience. Are you seeing like a large uptick in companies that is Life Sciences Cloud starting to really take off? I know it was like maybe a year or two where it was coming, and like we were waiting, and then now companies are like starting to jump on. So have you seen a large uptick in companies that are starting to raise their hand and say, yes, we want Life Sciences Cloud?
Yeah, I would say it right now, as far as what the pre-sales opportunities I have, Life Sciences Cloud has the highest number. So we're really seeing, I think there's enough technology built now in the tool that people are saying, whoa, like it's not just the first iteration of this has got some substance and some functionalities to it that we really want, and things that maybe Health Cloud didn't address or their current vendor didn't address. People are starting to have a look and then moving, like I say, we just showed the recruiters piece of the clinical trial management system, but there's more, right? So we've just given a little taste today, but there's a lot of stuff that can happen there. And that's both from the commercial side and the clinical side. And then in September, the big releases, right? So then we're going to get offline capabilities and the app, the iPad. So if you haven't seen that, that's very interesting. And that's something we're fully leaning into, and we're ready to get our hands on it in September.
Soon enough, close, not too.
Are you seeing a lot of customers trying to move off of Health Cloud into Life Sciences Cloud? Is there any traction like that?
Yeah, a few people who were wanting the data model from Health Cloud to not create custom objects, but maybe they didn't fit as Health Cloud itself, right? Because the two clouds are built for different use cases, but maybe they wanted patients and they wanted care programs and things like that. The other thing is that Life Sciences Cloud, because it was built and created in a space where there's a lot of AI and Einstein and Agentforce capabilities, I'm seeing a lot of people move over for those things. Some of the SKUs come with things like Tableau Next, Agentforce credits, Data Cloud credits, that kind of stuff. So they're like people who are fully embracing the AI and the technology are wanting that. And then just people who probably would have been a better fit for Life Sciences Cloud originally if it had been available when they moved to Health Cloud. Or some people I found have Health Cloud but not fully implemented and utilized to its greatest potential. So they're saying, hey, let's just get Life Sciences Cloud and do it exactly how we wanted it to be done in the first place.
Megan, I love this. This was really cool. And just during the whole demo, I was thinking how disruptive this will be to companies that are in the EDC space or CTMS, and how awesome it would be to have everything on platform in Salesforce. And I'm just curious about our one group of friends who maybe aren't as innovative as others, and that's the FDA. Have you seen anything from what their perspective is on enrollment using Salesforce?
Not really. Anybody who's used Salesforce knows that trust is the number one thing. So the data is fully secure and it passes all compliance, but I have not myself heard anything particularly for FDA, but that's a good call out. I hadn't thought of that, but we haven't seen that yet. And then just to know, we kept this tried to keep it very simple without all of the bells and whistles that could be done, because we just want to solve the problem and we just want to show the functionality. Like obviously you could dress up pages, you could have the reports and the dashboards and all those things, but getting people off spreadsheets, getting people off of, I just got off the phone, now I have to make a note that I made a phone call. Some of those things that are just standard Salesforce stuff that you had before Life Sciences Cloud, pulling that in with the data model, with the ability to use some of the smarter features, Omni Studio and Business Rule Engine. I'm finding there's a lot of power to that where people don't fully have to go to a solution like, oh, use full AI Agentforce to do things, but let's just use these tools that are good and that are here that everybody knows and trusts it. And then once that foundation's set, if you're wanting then to put your toes into the Agentforce pool, then people are trusting the data and the tool a little bit more at that point.
Thanks, Megan. This is Leif. Thanks for
Hey.
your presentation. Can you tell me, have you done any objection handling or anything with any of the other competitors in this space that help us position this? I know it's early, you're basically done with an MVP and you're getting in the market and adding some more features as you go, but is there anything, the elephant in the room is Viva, and anything that's been produced that allows people like myself as a consultant to essentially handle objections and guide these people through this process away from them?
Yeah, I would say like the majority of people that come to us have already decided they want to have a look, but to actually get them to convert over I think the biggest thing that people are nervous about is the data migrating the data in the middle of a clinical trial. That's why we're focusing right now primarily with that research piece and the recruiter piece. So the research study candidate, if we can get that set up and moving and make that a little bit stronger and you can see the power of the technology, it's a little more easy than saying just get rid of something you've used for years, then one day, right? You cut over and everything's gone, taking pieces of the pie and moving those over.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the objections are just that's it. Is, oh, we're in the middle of the trial. What about the data? What about the historic data? There's a lot of stuff there. It just feels like there's just so much information in those systems that it feels hard to get people to want to move it. It feels like a mountain instead of molehill.
Thank you.
Amazing. One of the pieces of feedback we've had is that people want a little bit more time to interact in small groups. So we've got 15 minutes left in the meeting. So I'm going to give everybody an invite for a breakout room. If you have time to move to your breakout room, get to meet some other people who are in the life sciences community, have a little chat with each other. But before we do that, please join me in either an actual applause or a virtual react for Megan and Jubin, who I think have opened our eyes to some of the incredible possibilities. And I know for me, this is the first I've seen anything like this, because probably because of the Viva thing that you were referencing, Leif, this is not something Salesforce themselves have been showing. So Megan, you puzzled it out, you thought it up and showed something really spectacular and I think innovative and interesting. And so please, if you're not connected with Megan, find her on LinkedIn. She is an extremely friendly and accessible person. So if you're like, I want to know a little bit more, please reach out to her. Otherwise, thank you everybody for joining us for today's Life Sciences Trailblazer group. We've got some additional meetings scheduled for the second Friday of the month for the rest of the year. If you have an idea and you'd like to present, please reach out to me, Shannon Gregg, also on LinkedIn. Otherwise, have fun in your groups and have a great weekend. Thanks, Megan and Jubin.